today we're going to look at the data flow in much more detail. We're going to start off with data flow, and so today the agenda is to dive deep into data flow, start off with connection managers, look at how to connect to different kinds of sources, destinations, and then go ahead with the different kinds of transformations. All right, so without any further ado, I'm going to go to the data flow tab, and as you can see, this is the demo 2 package that I've taken. So it's an empty package we're dealing in demo 1. So that is something that we leave untouched as it is, and we're gonna proceed on with the next one. That is demo 2. This is the empty package that we had. So I can go ahead and add a data flow task also using this option. As you can see, if there is no data flow task that is created, and if you go to data flow tab, it will give you this kind of an option where it says no data flow tasks have been added. You can just click here to directly add the task. Okay. Now, first up, we mentioned that in data flow there are components. There are 3 kinds of components. A component can either be a source, component can be a transformation, or a component can be a destination, right? So the sources are all listed out here, destinations here, and transformations all are here, right? So first up, let me talk a little bit about the different kinds of sources that you will have, and obviously there are a lot of different sources that you can see here. Just to quickly brief you through the sources, OLEDB stands for Object Linking Embedding Database. So OLEDB is the most common kind of source that we will encounter in our discussions, because OLEDB is used to connect to relational databases. Think of all relational databases, SQL Server, Oracle, and if you have to connect to a relational database, OLEDB source is what you will be using. Okay, so we talked about connection managers. I'm going to go to that discussion in a while. ODBC is, again, we all understand ODBC, Open Database Connectivity. So how do you set up your ODBC? So you can go to you can actually go to data sources. Just go to your start menu, type in data sources, and see data sources ODBC. And you click on this, you should be able to see that these are the different drivers that you can set up. Okay, this is where you can get your drivers set up and eventually connect to your ODBC source using this. We won't be talking about this in a lot of detail. Okay, in certain scenarios, specialized scenarios, you'll be using this. Flat file sources are typically used to connect to text files, which are in Notepad. We'll give an example of that. Excel obviously is used to connect to Excel files. ADO.NET is also another way in which you can connect to relational databases. So that is also a secondary way in which you can connect to relational databases. So between ADO.NET and OLEDB, the most preferred way of connecting is OLEDB because it is much faster compared to ADO.NET. Raw file source is a proprietary SSIS format. So we're going to look at raw file and their use cases also. So it's a proprietary SSIS format, and it's not a file that you can create in your Windows file system. It is a file that only SSIS, only the package can create. So it's internal to the engine, and it's nothing but a dump of your memory buffers. Okay. Now I'll talk a little bit about buffers when I talk about raw file source, but just remember that it is proprietary to SSIS. And finally, XML source. If you have an XML file, that's what it's used to connect to. Okay, so real quick, let's go back to our discussion. Let's go back to demonstrating how to create an OLEDB source. So simply go ahead and drag and the other thing that I wanted to touch upon, and before I start off with how to connect to a source, so we are discussing about connection managers, and I did show you that you can right click on this and you can create a connection manager. Let's say I can create a new connection manager, and as you can see, I'm creating a new OLEDB connection manager here. There are different kinds of providers, by the way, just to also flag this to you, depending on what you want to connect to. If you want to connect to an Oracle, you might want to select a different option here. Okay, so here it's the SQL Server native client by default. I'm going to go ahead and select that itself. Adventure Works, click on OK, and that's my connection manager that's created. Okay, now go ahead and rename it OLEDB Conman. This stands for connection manager. Okay, now what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to take my source. Remember from our discussion where we said that connection managers are your window to the outside world, right? So sources, the destinations are they're just the components. So the source will use the connection manager. So ultimately, when you take an OLEDB source, behind the scenes at the underlying layer, your OLEDB source is still using the connection manager, right? So how do you map this to this? That is what you do inside this particular window. Again, as we did in control flow, it's very simple drag and drop. Just drag and drop from the toolbox and place it onto this item on the design interface of data flow. So how do you do that? You can right click and edit it. Either you can right click edit or you can double click on it to configure its properties. And you can see it's the OLEDB source editor. And the first and most important option that you have to select here and configure here is the OLEDB connection manager. As you can see, it's the connection manager, right? So by default, this is already set to this option. To the connection manager I already created. You can see OLEDB conman, that's the connection manager I already created. So by default, it will be selected. Okay, so because OLEDB source at the underlying layer requires an OLEDB connection manager to connect to the source, to configure, right? So first thing it will do, it will try to search within that particular package what all available connection managers I have. And not only connection managers, you need to search for what all compatible connection managers you have. So if it's an OLEDB source, you're obviously looking at an OLEDB connection manager. So it does find a match. So this was just a connection manager it created a while back, and you can see it's automatically selected. So there will be cases, and there'll often be cases where you may not want to do it in this way. You may want to directly. So let's say in this kind of a scenario, if you go ahead and remove this, if you go ahead and delete it, I can see there's no more connection manager. Now if you go back and double click on it, you will see this is blank. So in that case, obviously it cannot find any connection managers. You have to create a new connection manager. And when you click on new here, it will open up the same dialog box that you got when you clicked on new OLEDB connection manager from there. Okay, it's the same interface that comes up. And it's very intuitive. It's very self-explanatory, isn't it? What I'm trying to get at. So click on new, and it's the same process that you're following again. So click on AdventureWorks, just select AdventureWorks DW 2014, click on OK, and that's it. That's your connection manager that's again created, and that's automatically selected here. Okay, now data access mode is again connection manager is just a way for you to connect to the underlying database, right? So you not only connected to the server, you not only selected the server, but you also selected the underlying database. So in this case, this connection manager is nothing but a connection that points to the AdventureWorks DW 2014. Now, what do I do? Now, just think about it from the context of SQL Server. Now, when you open up SQL Server Management Studio and you click on New Query, ultimately what you do is, and one of the most important things that people will tell you as a check is select this particular drop down. Choose what database you want to run your queries against, right? If I go back and say select star from, let's say, team product here, if I select this, it will throw an error. You can see that IntelliSense is going to complain invalid object name. The reason is because I have the incorrect database selected. So you have to make sure that you have the right database selected for you to run the right query. And that's exactly what we are doing here also. So ultimately, it's your OLEDB source. You have to make sure that so you're not pointed to the database. You're not selected the right database. But then what is it that you want to do? You want to write a query. You want to write a SQL command against that, or you want to access the tables there, or you want to access the tables or views through a variable, or you want to access the SQL command through a variable. That's what the data access mode properties stand for. And just to go step by step, just to come to the SQL command as I'm demonstrating here. So let's say you want to write a very simple query like this: select star from dim product. Okay, how do you do that? I mean, when you execute this query, what happens? You get a result set of all the rows and columns of dim product, right? Select star, so it will return everything in dim product. This is what you will be expecting, right? And you can do the similar thing here also. You can go to SQL command text. So what you're doing is in the source, what are you doing, right? And again, I don't want to confuse you here. I hope all of you are with me on this. Connection manager is just a way for you to connect to the database. So using connection manager, all you did was you connected to the underlying database, right? It is using the source that you're specifying exactly what are you retrieving, right? Because connection manager is just a connection. It's just the connection that you're doing. Connection manager is like saying, I'm just selecting from the drop down. That's all that connection manager is. So it gives you the gateway to the database. Now, what do you do from that? You want to fetch the tables one by one from here? Then you select a different data access mode. You want to write a SQL command on the database? Then you select a different access mode. Okay, so let me go ahead and copy this statement from here, select star from dim product, and let me go ahead and paste it. So you can either do that, or you can, it's very easy to go ahead and build a query. So when you go to build query, it opens up a very, very simple query builder interface. So in Management Studio also, you get a very similar kind of interface here when you say design query in editor, right? So this is where you type in a SQL command And if you want a more graphical UI, you can actually say design query in editor. It opens up a very, very similar interface in SSIS also. So this is the query designer interface that we just now showed you, right? So come back to SSIS. It's the same query builder interface. The names are different. Query designer is query builder, right? So you can right click on this, add a table. You want to add dim product, add, and what you want to do is you want to select all the columns, right? You can see dim product star, or you can just go back and say select star. Means the same thing, right? Click on OK, and that's your query builder. Simple enough. It by default star would mean it will select all the columns by default. Okay, so it doesn't look pretty good. So what I'll go ahead and do is I'll simply go ahead and just say star. Right. So go to preview, and preview will give you what that particular query will return as a result set. So preview is just like executing that query in Management Studio and getting the result set for you. So that's what a SQL command is. Very simple and very, very, very easy to understand this, isn't it? Now, the next way you can access is through a table of view. And as I mentioned, instead of writing a SQL command, you can basically select the tables of views from your database. So remember, through Connection Manager, you have chosen the database of your choice. Through Connection Manager, you have chosen that you want to work with AdventureWorks TW 2014. You've chosen that. Now, using table of view, you can choose the underlying tables of views of that particular database. So if you click on this drop down, you will get all the tables of views of that particular database. So I can actually go back and select dim product, and it would mean that it's basically doing a select star. So when you select table of view access mode, and when you say name of table of view is dim product, it's essentially what it means is it's retrieving everything from that particular table. So it's just like saying select star from dim product. So click on preview, and it's the same result that we got last time, right? So this is what table of view means. The other option is table of view name through a variable. Now this is a very, very interesting option, and to demonstrate this, I'm going to go ahead and create a variable. You can right click on this and you can create a variable. I'm going to go ahead and call it demo table. It's a string variable, and I'm going to call this, let's say, dim customer. So the only different thing that we are doing here, as you can just to highlight this again. So what we are doing here is demo underscore table. That's a variable. Data type is string, and you can see the value is customer. Right. I'm just going to go ahead and check my scope once. You can see it says package 1. I'm just going to go ahead and check my scope once. Right. Now, what we need to do now is, so all this while what we were doing is we're going to table of view. You can choose the tables from here. It's just like doing a select star and ultimately return a result set. But here, what we're going to do is we're going to choose that table of view name from a variable. Right. So instead of choosing my table of view from the drop down, I'm going to make the process dynamic, and I'm going to choose the table of view name through a variable. Choose the variable from here. That's the variable that we created. Demo underscore table. Click on preview, and you should be able to see that the results from dim customer are coming up. Right, so that's dim customer. So if you want to change that, so just click on OK. I'm not going to modify anything. Just go to variables, and let's say you want to change this to something else. Let's say you want to make a dim currency. Just edit the value here. Edit the value, and you don't want to take any changes here. So demo table internally refers to dim currency, and now what you will do is, if you go to preview, you'll see that now it's automatically picking it up on dim currency. Okay, so that's what the difference between variable name means. And the other option, the final SQL command, as we have discussed already. And one of the advantages of SQL command, obviously, it's the most preferred way of data access, right? So it's something that you will do all the time in production. In production environments, you'll typically never select tables from the drop-down. So you'll almost always use SQL command. Because one of the most important reasons is performance, from the performance standpoint. Because if you don't use SQL command, then by default, if you're selecting from the drop-down, by default, you're doing a select star. And SQL command is a way for you to A, limit your columns, and B, you can use multiple tables. So you can see that here you cannot use multiple tables. So in table of view, you can only select a single table at a time. But in case there could be complex scenarios where, let's say you want to build a query where you want to add a table you want to take by factory sales, and you want to also take a dim product. You want to build a slightly more complex query. and you want to pull in the color from here, and you want to pull in the sales amount from here, and you can see I'm clearly doing a join. And let's say you want to also pull in the English product name from here. Click on OK, and you can see that in these kind of cases you have to use a SQL command, and SQL command just gives you much more flexibility over the kind of query that you want to write and the kind of results that you want to include in your particular source. Because what is a source? Think about it from this point of view. A OLEDB source, as I mentioned initially, is a way for you to retrieve data from a relational database, right? So when I said retrieve data, ultimately what you're doing is you're querying your database and you're getting a result set. That's what you're doing at the end of the day. So it's about writing a SQL statement, SQL command either way. So whether you do a drop down from here, whether you're choosing a table from here, or you're writing a SQL command, either ways you're fetching a result set. That's what entering your SSIS package. Okay, so if you click on the preview here, you can see that those are the 3 columns that are included here, right? Those are the 3 columns are included. Pretty straightforward, pretty intuitive what we are doing. Now, all this while we've been talking about data access mode, which is fine. So first step was connection manager. That's your window, what you want to connect to. Next, how you want to connect to it is through a SQL command. You just want to choose the tables. And after that, what you do is you go to columns. And in columns, you are defining what is it that you want to bring inside SSIS. Okay, so this is what the columns option helps you contain. You see those checkboxes? Yeah. So these are the 3 columns that you will see. Why do you see only 3 columns? That because that is what you are bringing into SSIS at this moment. Think about it from this point of view. You have your database sitting here. That's your database. That's a SQL query that you write. That's a SQL query. And the SQL query will obviously return a result set. So result set I will say is RS. RS stands for the result set. Yeah. Now it is that result set that contains 3 columns. I'll just denote 3 columns using 3 lines. Your result set contains 3 lines. Now it could so happen that you don't want to bring all the 3 columns inside SSIS. Now obviously it's a very rare case. We never do that. But I just want to tell you that you can still have 3 columns in the result set, but you can still filter further here. So if you can uncheck this, let's say at the last moment you decide, okay, I don't want English product name, you can actually uncheck here. And now what you will have is you will only have these 2 columns entering SSIS. Okay, see this component here? Let me go ahead and click on OK and show you. So click on OK here. And you can see this component now will bring in only 2 columns into SSIS. Okay. The other thing I wanted to briefly touch upon, and I was mentioning this very briefly when I was talking about raw files, so something called memory buffers. Everything in SSIS happens in memory. It's an important concept, but it's something that all of us should appreciate. The fact that everything in SSIS, and the fact that SSIS is so fast, transformations happen on the fly. In general, operations happen pretty fast in SSIS. Okay, and one of the reasons is because SSIS is in memory. So what you're doing, and when I say in memory, I mean to say everything happens, your RAM is utilized for this purpose, random access memory. Okay, so when you're bringing data into SSIS, so your data is ultimately, all these operations are performed in your RAM. Okay, and obviously if you have a huge amount of data that you're importing, and if you don't have the resources, your packages can actually hang up, right? So in this scenario, what we are doing is we are reading in so and so many rows, so and so many columns from our underlying database. And where is that going? Where is that data going? That data is actually entering into the RAM. So when I say entering into SSIS, I indirectly mean to say that data is entering into your RAM, and it is from there that you can do other activities. Let's say I haven't talked about transformation so far, but then you can actually connect these arrows. Now please note that these arrows are different from the arrows I showed you in control flow. Again, we haven't spoken deeply about precedence constraints. Now what am I trying to say? So the arrows that you see in control flow, this is what we call a precedence constraint, right? So this is a precedence constraint. The arrows that you see here are data flow paths. These are data flows. So you can just click on this and you will see that this is what we call a data flow path. Make sense? It's a data flow path. This is what we call a data flow path. In other words, and I think this just to accentuate a discussion, just to accentuate the concept of memory buffers even further. So what it means is that through OLEDB source, you're bringing your data into memory, you're bringing your data into SSIS, and all that you perform in data flow everything you perform, and the name is very synonymous, isn't it? Data flow. So all that you define here is how your data is flowing to the memory buffers and what are you doing in the process. So at the source level, you're bringing your data into the memory buffers, and finally, after all the transformations that you will do, you're going to load your data to a particular file through the destination. So all the operations that you perform in the memory buffers, and all this while you're transferring data from one stage to the other. So first this, then this, then this, then this, and so on and so forth. That's what the arrow signifies. Arrow signifies how your data is flowing. It's just like a pipeline, and water is flowing to the pipe. Only in this case, data is flowing to the pipe. That's what the data flow. That's what this particular arrow means. A data flow path. And don't confuse this with control flow. The green arrow, which stands for precedence constraints. What this means is this is just a data flow path. This is how data is flowing between your source and your different transformations, and the destinations, of course. Okay.
I'm sure you enjoyed learning from this video. Please like the video, and if you have any doubts regarding this video, please comment us in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more such informative videos. Do look out for other related videos in our playlist. For more information, visit our website now. Keep learning with Intellipaat.